Among the 5 major ports of the Panama Canal, 2 have been operated since 1997 by C.K. Hutchison Holdings, a pro-Chinese conglomerate based in Hong Kong. They cut off diplomatic ties with Taiwan, which they had maintained for a long time, and instead established relations with China. You could say that Panama started siding with China. Of course, there is only so much China can do to influence the running of the Panama Canal, but the Panama Canal is effectively the main artery of U.S. logistics. Letting this be controlled by China is obviously a problem for the U.S.
Today we're talking about the Panama Canal. President Trump has been repeatedly talking about taking the Panama Canal back, causing concerns for many countries that rely on it for global trade. They're worried about what the Trump administration might demand of them and how to navigate those negotiations. Canada, for instance, is even being told to become the U.S.'s 51st state. Panama is being told to hand over its key national asset. How are they supposed to navigate this?
And then there's Greenland. President Trump wants to buy Greenland. That's putting Denmark in an awkward position. Even before Trump took office, he was putting these kinds of bargaining chips on the table. So let's explore the key issues surrounding the Panama Canal, particularly in the context of history. Trump seems to be serious about the Panama Canal. He has already nominated Kevin Marino Cabrera for ambassador to Panama. Trump described Cabrera as a fierce fighter for America First principles and wrote, "Few understand Latin American politics as well as Kevin. He will do a fantastic job representing our nation's interests in Panama." As a result, the negotiations and uncertainties surrounding the Panama Canal have become quite real.
The most notable word in Trump's statements about the Panama Canal is reclaim.
Meaning he wants the U.S. to take it back.
That implies that the Panama Canal originally belonged to the U.S.
First off, the United States constructed the Panama Canal. I'll dive into that history in a bit. But first, President Trump claims that tens of thousands of American works shed blood and even died building the Panama Canal. Some 38,000 American workers, according to him. This isn't exactly true. Records show that the number was closer to 20,000.
President Trump often uses the 40,000 figure for the number of U.S. troops in Korea.
So he isn't always accurate with his numbers. Regardless of what the actual number is, the argument is that the Panama Canal was built with American sweat and blood, therefore it belongs to America. Naturally, Panama is firmly pushing back against this claim. 4 former and current Panamanian presidents assert that the Panama Canal isn't negotiable. Let's first dive into why there's the demand to return the Panama Canal, as well as the importance that the canal holds. There seem to be 2 main aspects. Panama holds considerable importance in maritime logistics. Then there's the importance of leveraging the Panama Canal to effectively counter China's influence. First, in logistics, the Panama Canal accounts for around 5% of the world's seaborne logistics. By comparison, the Suez Canal accounts for about 15%. So you might think, that's only a third of Suez? But the more critical point is that during the age of exploration, Europe was on the right side of the Atlantic. As the Europeans embarked on their journey to explore the New World, they all sailed westward, reaching this side. That is why most of the major ports are on this side. That means to get from the East Coast to the West Coast, ships have to go through the Panama Canal. And from an East Coast port like New York to Asia, including Korea and of course China, you also need the Panama Canal. Also, for goods heading to South America, using the Panama Canal is unavoidable.
Even routes to the Middle East go through there?
Exactly.
Yes.
In total, about 70% of the cargo moving through the Panama Canal is bound for Asia and the west coast of South America. The Panama Canal's significance to the United States cannot be overstated.
It's crucial whenever the U.S. wants to export goods.
For both importing goods from Asia and exporting elsewhere, the Panama Canal is crucial for the U.S. This naturally elevates the Panama Canal to an economically sensitive topic for America. Regarding countering China, which I'll discuss further later, the canal's strategic importance has led the U.S. to invest significant efforts over the past century to ensure Panama aligns with American interests.
That makes sense. If Panama ever fell to communism and became hostile to the U.S., that would be a major threat. Picture this. Traveling from New York to L.A. by water becomes a real challenge. It would make reaching Chile very difficult, and Chinese ships wouldn't be able to go to New York.
Right, very possible. Now consider what happened in Panama back in 2017. The country made a significant move, cutting its long-term diplomatic ties with Taiwan to establish relations with China. And that's when you start to realize that Panama is shifting towards China's influence. Since 1997, two of the five main ports of the Panama Canal have been under the control of C.K. Hutchison Holdings, a Hong Kong conglomerate with pro-China ties. While China doesn't have unrestricted access to operate the Panama Canal, it's crucial to understand that this canal is like a major artery for U.S. logistics, a lifeline, in fact. Letting China have too much influence over this is something that the U.S. must closely monitor.
I thought President Trump was being ridiculous, but it's starting to make sense. Even if literally taking the canal isn't his actual end goal, the threat of it is a strategic move and a warning to China.
It certainly seems so. It appears that way. Now let's dive into the history. We'll explore how the U.S. acquired Panama, the measures it took to retain control, and how the Panama Canal eventually returned to Panama. The idea of the Panama Canal first emerged during the Age of Exploration. Spain played a crucial role here, engaging in trade and establishing numerous colonies in this very region. As you can see, much of South America was colonized by Portugal and Spain. During this time, Vasco Balboa enters the annals of history. He was a member of the Spanish lower nobility. Simply calling him a man doesn't fully convey his impact. Essentially, he belonged to the Spanish lower nobility and played a crucial role in founding a colony in Panama. In fact, Panama's currency is still named after him, the Balboa.
Wow, he rose from being a minor noble in Spain to nearly a founding father figure in Panama?
Exactly. I've got a coin displayed on the screen right now, and you can see Balboa's name and image on it. In fact, there are quite a few terms people use for Balboa. Some even call him something of a rogue. He's often labeled as a drifter or vagrant, yet he's known for being exceptionally cunning and indulgent. His reckless lifestyle, especially gambling, plunged him into debt, forcing him to run from the creditors. In desperation, he stowed away on a ship which by chance set sail for Panama. Once in Panama, he incited a rebellion among the indigenous people, seizing power and making his mark on history.
Isn't he a bit of a puzzling figure to celebrate?
He is indeed. That's why I hesitated to address him as Sir earlier. But remember, Panama was once a Spanish colony, and Spain was a monarchy. Since Panama was a Spanish colony, when Vasco Núñez de Balboa took power, it was effectively a coup against the Spanish crown. Although Balboa gained control, he quickly realized that to avoid execution for his coup, he needed to present something extraordinary to the Spanish king, something even more significant than Columbus discovering the New World.
Instead of seeing it as a coup, he thought, I'm discovering a wonderful place here.
And I'm sharing it with you.
So he decided to present it to the king.
That's when he began exploring the mountains, climbing to the peak, where he saw a sea he'd never seen before. That ocean was the mighty Pacific. Vasco Núñez de Balboa, thus, became the first European to behold the Pacific Ocean, securing his place in history.
He is indeed quite a remarkable figure.
Yet there's ongoing debate about whether he discovered the Pacific or simply viewed it. Reflecting on that era, Europeans had sailed the Atlantic to reach the lands of North and South America, but beyond lay unexplored worlds. When Vasco Núñez de Balboa first glimpsed the Pacific Ocean, it was a groundbreaking moment. He became the first European to behold such a vast body, realizing there was another ocean and perhaps more land beyond.
Based on their maps and limited knowledge, this new finding was astonishing. They had stumbled upon the Americas, initially mistaking it for India. According to their understanding, the Atlantic Ocean was believed to lead directly to India, making the existence of the Pacific a hidden secret.
It truly was a remarkable discovery.
To them, it was as if the Pacific Ocean had always been there. Since Europeans hadn't seen it, they ignored it and ventured on, calling it India. Then Balboa came across it and realized, oh, there's an ocean here.
And so Vasco Balboa became the first European to lay eyes on the Pacific Ocean. That said, he was infamous for his violence, massacring the indigenous people. He himself was eventually executed by beheading. Yet, his discovery of the Pacific Ocean was revolutionary. Back then, Peru was a Spanish colony as well. Traveling from Spain to Peru took a long detour. The king wanted a more direct route, leading many to suggest, if only a canal existed through Panama, the trip would be much faster. The idea made sense. However, the issue back then was the lack of technology. Thus, the idea just remained an idea. It lingered from the 1500s into the 1800s, an era of vast exploration and colonization. In 1808, by a twist of fate, Napoleon I of France invaded Spain. This plunged Spain into national chaos, leaving it unable to manage its colonies effectively. Consequently, the spark of independence ignited across its South American territories. During that era, Panama was part of Colombia. Sensing an opportunity, Colombia reached out to Britain and France, offering developmental rights in Panama in exchange for military support. Even then, Panama's strategic significance made it a key player in international deals. Truly, what a valuable piece of land. After numerous twists and turns, France eventually secured the rights to build the Panama Canal. But what ignited France's interest in such a colossal project? It traces back to 1869, just 9 years earlier, when France successfully completed the Suez Canal.
Clearly, they had some canal building expertise.
And, of course, France was the one that actually built the Suez Canal, right? The key difference is, when the French created the Suez Canal, it spanned 160 kilometers.
Looking at the map, that's twice the length of 80.
Twice as long, right? So the mindset was, we already dug through 160 kilometers of land before. This is only half of that. Let's finish this quickly and grab lunch. But when the French began their excavation, they encountered rock. They couldn't penetrate it. Moreover, compared to the Suez Canal in Egypt, the climate here was incredibly dry. Despite the heat, the risk of outbreaks remains relatively low. Yet, unlike the Suez region, this area experiences an extended rainy season from April to December. Amidst the heat and constant rain, workers tragically succumbed to endemic diseases like malaria and yellow fever, leading to many fatalities. Ultimately, they had to surrender. This leads to the introduction of a new figure, Gustave Eiffel, the genius behind the Eiffel Tower, during what is known as the Panama Scandal. The original plan was straightforward: excavate the land for the Panama Canal. When that failed, it was clear a new approach was necessary. Urgent assistance was requested, bringing Eiffel into the picture. In a final attempt, Gustave Eiffel, renowned for the Eiffel Tower and the Statue of Liberty's framework, was brought in to redesign the project. Eiffel, a true structural genius, was enlisted to lend his expertise in hopes of achieving a breakthrough. However, construction faced constant delays, and the Panama Canal Company eventually went bankrupt due to financial troubles. This fiasco led to the Panama Scandal, with Eiffel accused and convicted of investor fraud.
So it was privately funded?
Yes, it was privately funded. With France withdrawing, the United States stepped in. The U.S. had been waiting for this moment. After France's failure with the canal, America seized the opportunity. Remember, Panama was then part of Colombia. At first, the U.S. negotiated with Colombia. They offered, "Let us take control, and we'll pay you $10 million up front, plus an annual $250,000. Just grant us the rights to operate the Panama Canal."
Oh, this time it's backed by foreign investment.
Yes, it's foreign funded, but progress stalled in the Panamanian Congress, and ultimately, it was dismissed. What happened next? The U.S. saw that Panama, despite its independence from Spain, was still part of Colombia. So, there were factions in Panama advocating for independence from Colombia, a separatist movement. These were the groups the United States decided to engage with.
It's the classic American strategy.
They supplied weapons and sent troops, ultimately supporting Panama's independence, which was achieved on November 3, 1903. That date is pivotal. Exactly 2 weeks later, on November 18th, they signed a treaty with Panama to gain rights to build the canal and permanently lease land there. The goal was clear from the start.
Helping them gain independence was all about securing the Panama Canal.
Exactly. Just 15 days later, these events unfolded, leading the United States to finally build the Panama Canal amid a flurry of negotiations and political maneuvering. So they completed the canal's construction. By 1914, the canal was operational, but its opening triggered a series of intense conflicts. Let's explore these from two perspectives. For Americans, as Trump noted, there is a sentimental value. The canal is seen as a symbol of American innovation and achievement, a monumental legacy crafted by the U.S. Economically, the feeling was that despite the huge foreign investment in its construction, the canal's revenue was disappointing. During the construction of the canal, we managed malaria and yellow fever vaccinations in Panama, effectively eliminating those diseases. And we shouldn't forget, we built roads, sewage systems, power grids, and schools. We provided all of that infrastructure. You're reaping the benefits of it all as an added bonus.
But when Americans talk like that, it understandably irritates the Panamanians.
So, let's explore how the Panamanians of that era truly felt about the situation. Emotionally, Panamanians see the Panama Canal as their own cherished asset. That's their emotional perspective. Economically, the issue was the lease payments from the U.S. were too low. That was one problem. Plus, Panamanians naturally spoke Spanish. Yet the American canal administrators preferred hiring English-speaking staff. They only employed workers who spoke English. There was also wage discrimination. English-speaking workers received gold status and were paid in dollars, whereas Spanish speakers, chiefly Panamanians, earned significantly less. Even though they constructed many infrastructures, policies were in place to prevent Panamanians from accessing them. This greatly heightened tensions, eventually sparking violence in the region due to the severe conflicts. In 1964, a pivotal event occurred due to land leased by the U.S. The U.S. had leased around 10 miles of land on either side of the Panama Canal, treating it as American soil. They even forbade the Panamanian flag from being flown there. With ongoing racial discrimination and wage inequality, the Panamanian people's frustration was growing. In response to these grievances, Panama proposed, "If the U.S. won't allow us to fly the Panamanian flag here, let's agree not to fly any flag, not even the U.S. flag." Then the Americans decided to act. They went to Balboa High School. Recall the name Balboa? At Balboa High School, they raised the American flag. Seeing this, dozens of Panamanian students from Balboa High School rushed in and declared, "All right, we'll raise our flag too." So they raised the Panamanian flag. This escalation led to a violent conflict, resulting in 25 deaths and hundreds injured. This incident made it clear that the U.S. had to completely rethink its policy towards Panama. This marked a pivotal shift in policy towards reducing tensions. As tensions built over the years, on September 7, 1977, the late former U.S. President Jimmy Carter made a groundbreaking move. He signed the Torrijos-Carter Treaties with General Omar Torrijos of Panama. The agreement outlined a gradual transition of the canal's operations to Panama, targeting complete control by December 31, 1999. Thus, the course was set for Panama to finally assume command. Now, here's a crucial point we must discuss. You mentioned earlier that Panama is mountainous, correct? This highlights a significant difference between the Suez Canal and the Panama Canal. Why did the French succeed with the Suez Canal but falter with the Panama Canal? The Suez Canal had seas on both ends. All you needed was to create a trench in between, allowing the seawater to fill it. Ships would then traverse the channel formed by the incoming water. At first we thought it was just a mountain. The idea was if we could dig through it, we'd connect the seas. But we encountered rock instead. So, digging was out of the question, and they paused construction to reconsider. This sparked a new concept. What if we built a series of steps or locks? This was in the early 1900s. But the main challenge was, how did they lift ships over these steps? When you open those gates, wouldn't the water just rush out everywhere?
It would flow right down, right?
So how do they manage this without electricity using just gravity? Here's the trick. They connect the water at 2 levels with a pipe at the base. When opened, gravity allows the water to balance itself naturally. As the pipe is opened, water from the higher level flows down, and water from the lower level moves up. In the end, the water levels meet perfectly in the middle. When the gate opens, the ship can advance to the next level. Here, the water levels drop slightly, allowing us to open the pipe to the next gate. The water flows down, and as the lower water level rises, they meet perfectly at a new level. Then you open this gate, and the ship sails through effortlessly.
The main thing is the whole system depends on having plenty of water at the top.
Which leads us to a big question. Who's going to keep this water topped up? As the water drains away, there's nothing automatic to replace it. This is the exact problem we've seen from last year into this year, where droughts have caused severe delays at the Panama Canal. The irony is, even though it's surrounded by ocean, the canal struggles to keep enough water. But having plenty of water in the surrounding seas is pointless. As I mentioned earlier, one of the reasons France struggled with the Panama Canal was the extended rainy season from April to December. While it led to diseases causing many deaths, from an operational perspective, this period was crucial for replenishing the canal's water levels. Typically, from April to December, the rain fills the necessary reservoirs. This water is essential for raising and lowering ships as they pass through. The historical differences between the Suez and Panama Canals were quite notable. Now, the major issue is the increasing influence of China and Russia in Latin America. This seems to be the focal point. That's what stands out.
When you hear President Trump talk about wanting the Panama Canal back, it might seem like he's just after the profits. But if you look into Trump's statements, they often have historical context. So even if he's not literally demanding control over it, there's likely another motive. This ties back to our earlier discussion about China and Russia's involvement.
Let's recall that the United States was once Latin America's largest trading partner. Why was this the case? The land connections made logistics much simpler, up until the year 2000, indicated by the black areas representing the U.S. Throughout Latin America, the United States led in trade partnerships. However, by 2021, the scene changed significantly, with blue areas now representing China. In recent years, many Latin American countries have shifted their largest trading partner from the U.S. to China. China is now the focus. Reflecting on the past, Panama turned over canal control in 1999. Conveniently, by 2001, China joined the WTO, which opened the doors for international trade with many countries. As a result, China has become a key trade partner for many, including those in Latin America. In a similar trend, some Latin American countries have recently suggested using the yuan for trade with China instead of the dollar. Brazilian President Lula openly advocated for de-dollarization, emphasizing China's growing influence in Latin America. Additionally, several Latin American countries held elections not too long ago. You probably recall what happened then. It marked the so-called pink tide. Most leaders in Latin America have shifted towards leftist governments. Previously, their ties with China were mostly economic, but this pink tide opens doors for ideological alliances too, which is becoming a growing concern.
Third world theories often focused on regions like Latin America. During the Cold War, as the US and Soviet Union vied for power, Latin American countries leaned toward leftist regimes, resisting American liberalism. To this day, many are still led by leftist governments, potentially aligning with communist countries like China. Given this, it's clear why figures like President Trump and others in the US keep a close watch on Latin America, especially the strategic Panama Canal.
It's interesting to observe how Russia, with its historical ties to communist nations, has not been very active in Latin America until recently. Lately, however, their influence here is growing rapidly. In the energy sector, for example, the Korea Institute for International Economic Policy reports a significant rise in Russian exports of refined products to Latin America. Take diesel. Russia's exports to Brazil were just 74,000 tons in 2022, but shot up to 663,000 tons in the first quarter of 2023 alone.
Since they're being advised not to sell to the West, they're pivoting to Latin America.
Exactly. They're selling to Latin America instead. In Latin America, Russia is targeting countries under authoritarian rule. These regimes often require one vital resource: weapons. To extend its reach, Russia is using military influence. Countries like Peru, previously under authoritarian rule, have become major importers of Russian helicopters. In Nicaragua, under dictatorial leadership, Russia provides military equipment and support. Venezuela, another authoritarian state, participates in joint military exercises with Russia. These actions highlight Russia's strategic moves to build military alliances with Latin American regimes. Russia has been actively expanding its influence by targeting authoritarian regimes in Latin America.
If you really want to understand Trump's mindset, he's signaling a change in negotiation tactics from the way the US used to manage Panama.
Was there a similar shift with Panama in the past? Yes, the US used to be even more forceful with Panama, including dealing with a dictator. There was a man named Noriega. Now, who was he? Well, he was actually a CIA asset, specifically for the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States. Yes, he was on their payroll. He served as an informant. But he wasn't just any informant. He was a trusted confidant to Panama's dictator, exchanging valuable intel with the agency. However, when Noriega became Panama's dictator himself and started following his own agenda, the U.S. took decisive action. They sent about 27,000 troops to invade Panama and remove him. Given Panama's strategic importance, the U.S. has historically worked hard to maintain pro-American influence there. When a dictator resisted U.S. policies, America didn't hesitate to intervene militarily. Today, it's unclear whether the U.S. would use such aggressive tactics. However, Trump's mentioning of the Panama Canal, a topic not previously used as leverage, raises questions. If Panama becomes a focal point in a geopolitical struggle, what impact could this have on global trade, particularly between China and the U.S.? It's a concerning issue.
The phrase "give Panama back" might seem odd. Yet, when Trump talks about reclaiming the Panama Canal, it reflects America's intent to strengthen its influence in the region. There could also be demands for negotiating better transit fees or curbing Chinese influence, with high stakes, intense negotiations might happen, where the US could push for preferential treatment for its ships or encourage alliances over partnerships with China. Trump's assertive statement might just be the first step in a larger negotiation strategy regarding Panama. Hearing about the Panama Canal story, we better grasp what President Trump means and the potential negotiations behind his words. It might be wise not to take President Trump's demands at face value, but to explore the historical and economic context for deeper negotiation opportunities. This has been a deep dive into the complexities of the Panama Canal, truly enlightening.